What going on, guys? I'm Andy and welcome to a new video on my 3D modelling journey. So since the last episode I've made a huge amount of progress in 3D modelling. Last video you saw I modelled a phase 1 clone trooper helmet and a stormtrooper helmet as well. And since then I've decided to take on a project to model a whole character, that being the TK Trooper from the Bad Batch. First of all though, I just want to take a minute to talk about my Ko-Fi page. Are you interested in making 3D animations or still images in Blender and Unreal Engine like me, but don't have the time or money to find assets and texture them to your own needs? Well, my Ko-Fi page is a bunch of custom textured Battlefront 2 models, such as the Phase 1 and Phase 2 clone troopers, and Commander Cody and Captain Vaughn, with much more on the store already and much more on the way as we speak. Plus, the TK Trooper that I'm showing off me modelling in this video is also up on my Ko-Fi page for you to purchase, as well as a separate texture pack which includes a 501st, 212th, 13th and Corsair Security Core texture pack to go along with it. So if you're interested in using this in your 3D scenes or animations, go check it out. I also have commissions open, mainly for texturing models in Substance Painter, but Ko-Fi has the message before commission feature now, so if you have any special requests or non-texture based commissions for me, then send me a message and we'll see if we can work something out. So if you want to check it out, click the link in the video description. So there are two reasons why I decided to model the TK Trooper. One reason being I love the design for the TK Trooper in the Bad Batch. I think it's a really nice blend between a Phase 2 clone trooper and a stormtrooper. But also because looking around the internet and the 3D community, there isn't many, if at all, good quality 3D models of the TK Trooper. There are a couple on Gmod and SFM, which is what I use to reference this model that I've made here, but it's not very high quality in model or texture form. So the main reason why I decided to give this a go is to make one that people could use as higher quality than what you find on Gmod. Now this video is going to be a sort of mini tutorial, as well as me just glossing over the basics of how I went about modelling this, but I do plan on doing a full tutorial on how to model something in a more long form video, so keep an eye out for that. So the first thing I did was find a base body that I would model around. Now there are a couple of different options I had. There are plenty of free base bodies on Sketchfab and ArtStation CG Trader, but they're not very high quality, and for a model that I wanted to pose and use for rendering, it wouldn't be very useful to use them for this. There are also some very good base bodies that you pay for, but considering I'm still learning at this stage, I didn't really know how this was going to go, and I didn't want to buy one and then waste it because I didn't know if this was going to work or not. That's when I came across this program called MakeHuman, which is a 3D body generator which you can use in Blender or Unreal Engine. It's not designed for base body purposes, but it does the job well enough for me to use it, so I did. So with the base body created, I imported it into Blender, as well as the base model from Gmod that I was going to use as reference for the model itself, as well as some images from the Bad Batch show to make sure I got as accurate as possible to what was shown on Disney+. The actual process of modelling this whole thing went pretty much the same as I did before, which you can see on the screen now. Extruding planes and lining them up with the model underneath, and then making adjustments afterwards if the model isn't really quite up to the reference images. Now if you model yourself, I would highly recommend you separate the model parts into separate smaller parts, especially the helmet, because it's usually made up of multiple smaller parts. So on screen now you'll see the progress shots that I captured when modelling, just to give you perspective of what I did and how it looks in different stages. Now once I completed the base modelling, I added a Subdivision surface modifier, which for those who are not aware increases your poly count for your model, making it much smoother and much nicer than the very low poly version that I, and probably you if you give this a go, will end up with when you're modelling. Now just a point to note, when you add the Subdivision surface modifier to your model, it may look like this, where it's less sharp, when the edges should be a lot sharper. It might look like somebody squashed it, right? Now what you do here is click each of the edges that you want to be sharp, and then press on your keyboard Shift then E at the same time, then while holding those two, press 1. Now if you accidentally sharpen an edge, press Shift then E like you did before, and then click the minus button and then click 1, and that will get rid of it. Alternatively, to make life easier, go to the select drop down at the top and then click select sharp edges and then click Shift E and 1. And this will work 9 out of 10 times by doing this little shortcut, but occasionally it will sharpen edges it shouldn't, or it'll miss one. So if you do that, go around your model again and make sure it hasn't either missed one or it's sharpened an edge that it shouldn't do, because that'll make your model look strange when you apply your subdivision surface modifier. Another point to note as well before you apply your subdivision surface modifier is make sure that if your model is split into parts. For example, my helmet, as you can see on the screen now, is split into the top part of the helmet, the visor, breather parts, mouth plate, and main helmet. They're all separate different parts, and that's mainly just to aid me in modelling, but you'll want to join them up before you apply your subdivision. The way you do that is select all the parts and then that you want to combine into one model, go up to the object tab at the bottom, it's another drop down, and then click join. Now, if you want my advice, I would join them up in sections first. So, for example, make up the mouth first, so for example, you've got like the breather parts and the little detail bits. Apply them up first. Then, let's say, attach the visor to the main helmet, and then you've got 3 bits, and then attach them together as one helmet. There's not particularly any reason why, but it's just to be safe, just in case something happens in between. So then I exported the base body and put it through AccuRig for rigging. Now, you can do this at the start or near the end, but this is the workflow I feel worked for me, but yours might be different. Also, the reason why I'm just rigging the body and not the armor as well is because AccuRig, however much I love AccuRig and it saved me so much time when rigging and weight painting, it's pretty useless at rigging things that have armor attached. This is because the weight painting system in AccuRig is quite lazy and not very accurate, and it's very broad, and it's very broad. And if your model has armor on it, you'll run into issues where if you bend the hand, the forearm plate follows and bends with it. So once I rigged the body, I then imported it back into Blender, realign the armor, and then start parenting the armor pieces to the bones. Now, the way you do this is you click the armor piece and then shift click the skeleton, go into pose mode, then click the bone you want that armor piece to parent to, and which bone you want it to move with, press Ctrl then P, and then parent menu should come up, and then you click the bone option. Then go back into object mode, select the skeleton alone, go back into pose mode, and move that bone itself, and then the armor piece should move with it. And that's what I did for each of the armor pieces, and it seems to have worked quite well. Now, there is an element of trial and error to this, because if you have elbow plates or knee plates, sometimes you'll want to parent it to the elbow bone. Let's say with the elbow plate, you'll want to parent it to the elbow bone, like the twist bone. Other times you'll want to parent it to the arm bone. It depends on how you want the model to move when you're posing the skeleton. So once all the parts have been parented together, you want to UV unwrap the model. Now, this is by far the most painful and time-consuming part of this whole process, but it's 100% required. However, what I'm going to do is show you a cheat way to do it. So first of all, what you want to do is you want to select the part that you want to unwrap, so let's say the helmet, go into edit mode, go to edge select, select the select drop down, and then select sharp edges. Then you want to press Ctrl then E, then follow down to that menu that pops up and click mark seam. What this does is this tells Blender where the edges of the UVs are and where you want to have the seams spread apart. Now, the only issue with doing it this way is that sometimes, like the edge selection when you're sharpening your models after you use your subdivision, it can either miss edges or it can find edges that you don't want unwrapped, and that can screw over your UV unwrap. You'll find your UVs are all tiny little pieces. For me, I don't mind texturing that because I'm the only one who's going to be doing it, and I can work with that for the ease of unwrapping things. But if you're doing this for, let's say, like you're modeling for a client or something, who's then going to texture it themselves, personally, I would do it the old-fashioned way, which is working out where you want the seams to be, and then marking the seams manually, because that's what you've got to do with the body, you see. So the body doesn't have any sharp edges to it. So you want to, and generally speaking, it's quite easy because you can find the halfway point in the base model, split it in half with the seams, and then it will open up quite nicely in UV mode. But you can't, that's a bit more complicated to do with the armor parts because there's so much geometry in with them. If you're doing this just for yourself, do it this way, because it's easy, and as long as you're happy with a little bit messy UV, as long as they're not overlapping, they'll be fine to texture. If you want more neat and tidy UVs, especially if you're working for somebody and doing it for a client, then you'll want to do it the old-fashioned way, which is a lot neater, and if they're going to texture it afterwards, it's going to make their life so much easier as well. So once you've selected and marked all the seams, you then want to click U, and then UV unwrap, and that's that part of the model unwrapped for you. But if you notice when you go into your UV editor, the UVs are a mess, so you need to organize it. Now, you can do this manually, but I have a plugin which it costs about £30, I think, to purchase this off the Steam community store. It's called UV Masters, I think, or UV Master Wrap or something like that. But this does this whole thing for you. Now, personally, I've used this for everything that I've modeled since the Clone Trooper helmet at the start. Even with the UVs being messy, like what I've used and the way I've unwrapped my models, this organizes it nearly perfectly. It's not 100% perfect, especially if your models are cut up into, like, marked and cut up into small pieces. Sometimes it can overlap a little bit, but that you'll have to go and change yourself. 99% of the time, this thing is perfect. It's so good what this can do. Before you organize the UVs though, use UV Matters if you get that plugin, or do it manually yourself. What I'd recommend you do first is link up your materials. So what this means is that I can have multiple parts of the model use the same material set. Now, this is not only useful when texturing, because you don't have to individually texture each and every part individually in Substance Painter, but when you come to assigning the textures, you don't have that same arsake again as well. So what I did with my TK Trooper was I had each arm, each leg, the body and the helmet have their own material sets. So now you only have 6 to work with instead of 20 plus. So you link up the materials by shift clicking each part of the model that you want to have the same material. So in this particular instance, for one arm, for the TK Trooper, it will be hand plate, forearm plate, upper arm, shoulder, with the model that has the material you want to use selected last. Then click Control L, which opens up the link menu, and then link material, and job's done. Right? It's really easy to do, but believe me, it will make your life so much easier in the long run when not only texturing in Substance Painter, but also getting the textures to work in Blender or Unreal Engine, because there's so much less texture sets and types to connect up all together. Now, the reason why I did this before organizing my UVs is because when you link the materials up, the UV maps then combine and overlap. So if you've organized them already once, you're then going to have to do it again. So it's just saving time. So once I've unwrapped and organized the whole model's UVs, I then went to texture the model. And because I've got endless videos on YouTube about texturing in Substance Painter, I'm not going to go over it here. So there's plenty on YouTube. They're some of my most popular videos on YouTube, on my channel, let's say. So go and have a look at one of those. The process on those videos, especially the newer ones, are exactly the same as what the process would be for texturing this model. But once I have my textures, I assigned them to the model, made a render environment, and this was the result. So for my first character, I don't think it's half bad. It's not perfect, the topology is a bit of a mess in places, but I think it's okay. So that's about all I have time for in this video here. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching. I don't really quite know where I was supposed to go with this script. I just started rambling and turned it into a bit more of a tutorial than I thought it was going to do. But I think it's important, because one of the things that and I mentioned this in my last video, 3D modeling always came about to me as the most hardest thing to do with the 3D stuff, right? Substance Painter, it's not difficult, but it was a bit of a challenge, but I got over it. And Unreal Engine and Blender, again, they're not horrendous to learn, but they're just a bit of a challenge. but 3D modeling never really came as a natural suit to me, and I never really understood how people, you know, used to look at people like Mandalorian Business and like Locha Films with his stuff and his custom models, and I just look at them in awe and think I really wish to model something like that. And now I've not only modeled my own TK Trooper, which I'm really impressed with, and I'm really happy with the way that's turned out, but I'm also, as of recording this audio, in the process of finishing modeling a clone trooper, which I will use for other renders in the future, make little animations about as well. And that I'm really happy with. Now I'll post, if I've got it rendered by the time this video is finished in its editing, I'll put a render on screen now. If I haven't, I'll just put a in progress photo on screen now of how far I've got to so far. If you are interested in using my TK Trooper for any of your own future projects, go in the description down below to my Ko-Fi page. It's up on my Ko-Fi page in both 4K textures and 8K textures, whichever you prefer to use. As well as, by the time this video goes out, I will have a separate texture pack up, which will have 4 different, or maybe 5, I can't remember how many I've got at the moment, but 4 or 5 different battalion textures for the TK Troopers to resemble Clone Trooper battalions. So if you want to use those as well, have a look at that, have a look at the TK Trooper, and you can use it in whatever Unreal Engine or Blender renders or whatever you wish to use. So, hope you guys have enjoyed, I shall see you all later. Bye!